Welcome in, everyone. Week 15 fantasy football playoffs are here. RotoWire weekly ranking show. I'm normally with my sidekick, not my sidekick, I'm his sidekick. We're each other's sidekick, whatever, Joe Bartle. Joe is enjoying a well-earned day off after doing great work all year long. I'll be flying solo on this one. We'll get Joe back next week, though. We love Joe Bartle, so be great to see him back in next week. We be each other's sidekick for that one. We're both Batman. We're both Robin. We both figure out how to get it done. All right, let's start getting into some week 15. We know that some of you have a bye week, so if you're watching, you're just taking in the information, enjoying things. Those who made the fantasy playoffs, great. If you didn't make the fantasy playoffs, you might be using this for some DFS plays, maybe some prop bet ideas. Try to give you an edge on which players are looking good and maybe some not as good. So let's start out. Let's go into the quarterback position. I guess I should just begin by talking about the whole thing with the Phillip Rivers thing. Look, I don't know if he's going to play. Don't know if he's not going to play. Riley Leonard, I have him in my rankings for now. Apparently has a knee issue. I just think, unfortunately, the Indianapolis offense is going to be toast either way. So that's very unfortunate for a team that was really good for about half of the season. It is funny how the NFL changes so fast, though. We were talking Baker Mayfield as the MVP like in week 6. What's happened since? How things go up and down week to week in this league are just incredible. That's what makes it fun, right? And then we have to set our fantasy lineups, and always that makes it just as challenging. Excuse me. Sorry about that cough. I had to try to mute, and the mute didn't stick on me, so I apologize for that. All right. So when we're looking at the rankings, I have Dak Prescott as the quarterback 3 and Stafford as the 4. I'm thinking about flipping those. Dak and Stafford have both been very, very good. But I do think that Dak has the ability to have one of those weird games. And Minnesota's going to send that goofy blitz. And Dak's been great against the blitz. I imagine CD Lamb, from what I've heard, is going to pass concussion protocol. So I think he's fine. But Stafford against Detroit, I just don't know how Detroit slows them down. Detroit has a good enough run defense to make it more of a pass slant, and I imagine Detroit's going to cobble together enough offense to make this more of a shootout. So I'm probably going to push Stafford up to number 3 these are the early rankings. Of course, I revised them throughout the week. So, but yeah, I think I'm going to move Stafford up. I just see Stafford, and I have this decision in one of my leagues that I play in the Kings Classic League, the one I didn't get the buy-in because I'm an idiot, and I had 2 wrong lineup calls all year. I should have had the buy, but it cost myself for being a fool. But that's all good here. So all right, so let's go to I do have Jalen Hurts at quarterback 5, and I get he was a reason why I didn't go 14-0 in the Kings Classic Auction League. Thank you, Mr. Hurts, for those 5 turnovers. Anyway, all that said, my pity pot aside, Hurts is playing the Raiders, and I will say, the Eagles' offense, despite the turnovers, showed signs of life. Nick Sirianni's not an X and O's guy, but he did get involved in the game planning last week. I saw a little more motion, not a ton, but a little more motion. So there was that. And I do think overall there were signs of life from the offense. So I do think against the Raiders, the Eagles have a really, really easy 3-game stretch. They got the Bills, they've got the Commanders. So I definitely think we can look at Jalen Hurts, Saquon, we'll talk about them later. I think the Eagles will show up for you in the fantasy playoffs. I'm going on a limb here because they have not been good. Now, A.J. Brown's had 3 good weeks in a row. Coincidentally, they've lost all 3 of those games. So, that's kind of interesting. All right, but I'm going to get off that tangent real quick. Drake May, I have a quarterback 9. Now, here's the deal with Drake May. It's real simple. When the Patriots are in a game that they control and they can run the ball, May doesn't always throw as much. Now, sometimes you put some fantasy numbers with that. I think this game against Buffalo, they played earlier this year. They played in Buffalo, and New England won that game, and May didn't need to do a whole lot. But I think May's going to have to do more in this game. Buffalo's defense isn't good, and May's going to have no problem moving the ball. I do think that Buffalo has a sense of urgency here. I think, having seen the defense already, they don't have good receivers. We know that. They're going to have to get James Cook going. But Josh Allen's already putting the Superman cape on. We saw it last week a little bit. And it's that time of the year, right? Because if the Patriots win, do you know that Buffalo is eliminated from the NFC East? AFC East. They're eliminated. There would be 3 down, 3 left, and the Pats would have swept them. So I don't know if Buffalo's going to win the division anyway. I wouldn't anticipate that. But this is their last shot. Otherwise, they're playing their entire playoff run on the road unless something weird happens and 2 wildcard teams make the conference championship game, which in theory could happen, but a long shot of that one, right? So, but then again, anything this year could happen. So Drake May's an interesting start this week. I have a quarterback 9. I would normally rank him higher. Um, I still think both teams have some success running the ball. I think that Travion Henderson runs well. I think James Cook runs well enough. And I think that this, even though I said Allen's going to carry the team, I don't know if there's a shootout. I think this game probably ends up in the 20s. So I put Purdy a little lower. Now, Purdy always has upside because Purdy could run, right? So we like him there. And Jay's got a question. More, Jay's asking about them, Mayfield and May. You know what? Right now, Baker Mayfield. Now, one of the games he got injured, right? So that's in this 4-game sample. But he doesn't have I don't think it's over 180 yards, right around there in the last 4 games. It's been like 1 touchdown. And I get it. Mike Evans might come back, and I get it. They're playing Atlanta. But you know what? Baker, I don't think he's healthy because he's look, he's not the most accurate passer in the world, but he has really been off lately. And he had a pass to Ibuka. Ibuka might have been able to catch it for a touchdown, but Baker's just been off. And it is, and some receivers are dropping balls. Not his fault. It's just I got Baker at 14 this week, despite the great matchup. I I love Baker and I love the Bucks offense, but it just doesn't look right now. And if I'm in the fantasy playoffs and I've got Drake May and I got Baker Mayfield, I could make that case where, yeah, all right, Evans is back and Mayfield turns around a 4-week funk. It's a tough one. It's a real tough one to turn. So I would definitely start Drake May in that situation. I get the upside with Mayfield. I get it. If you're an underdog, if you're projected, you're the 6 seed, you're playing the 3 seed, and it's a great team, and you're 15, 20-point underdogs, then maybe you take the shot with Mayfield to see if they can get going against Atlanta, who really can't stop a whole lot, right? I do see questions here. I'll take these questions. If I see a question that relates to the position I'm talking to, I'll hit it at the end. I'll answer any questions. And thank you for a nice comment, LB Twins. I got a cough again. Excuse me 1 second. Okay, sounds good. All right. Other quarterbacks to look at. Jackson Dart. This is a tough one to rank. I have him at quarterback 11 this week. I said this after the concussion, and then he had a total of 4 concussion checks. So whether he had 1 or more, we don't know. But I kind of knew that Mike Kafka, the offensive coach, they were not going to be calling these designed runs with him. Too many hits to the head this year. Jackson Dart doesn't protect himself. Note the New England game that Monday night or a couple of weeks ago before the bye. Foolishly stayed in bounds, and then he got blasted, and he's not helping himself. So I think the coaching staff has to understand. Like Brian Dable was calling those design runs to save his job, I think. So Jackson Dart's a tricky rank. It's an easy matchup against Washington. But I don't know. During the bye, I don't know how much they talked to Dart about not running because they've got to keep this. They got to see what they have, and they have to keep him protected. So he's a risky start because if he runs, he could be the quarterback 4. We've seen it. 50-plus yards in a majority of his games on the ground. He's good running it in the end zone. All those can happen. They all can happen. But I'm very concerned coming out of the bye. But Washington would be that defense he could slice and dice. So Dart, if you want to take the chance that he runs a little bit, he's got real upside here. He got real upside. And then this game is a sneaky shootout potential because whoever's playing, this is Wednesday morning we're recording this. So if you're watching this later, you won't know the injury reports. I don't yet. But we don't know if Jaden Daniels is playing. Mariota at this point, I think either could be fine against New York. So that's that. Other players, Jacoby Brissett, he has been doing great every single week for you, but it is the lowest I've ranked him in a while. Quarterback 13. First time I put him out of the quarterback 1 range in a while. It's really hard to justify because it's Houston. And I know Michael Wilson's been great, but now Wilson's going to get either Lassiter or Stingley. I have to think that that's going to be a problem for Michael Wilson. And it's 3 games out of 4 when Harrison was out, it just lighting it up. But this is a death matchup. And the other problem is the pass rush. Jacoby Brissett's been great at eluding the pass rush, but man, this Houston pass rush is different. And it's certainly possible that Houston lets down after the win against the Chiefs. Is possible, but I don't want to bet on that. So Brissett, I have him with downside at 13 because this could be one of those games where the Cardinals can't score points. It's firmly in play. This is a bad situation. And Houston's at home. So I would be very nervous. Jordan Love, quarterback 12. I know he's throwing 3 touchdowns a week the last couple of weeks, but the pass attempts are low. And he's great. He's been playing great, but they're playing Denver. And Denver, how do you get to Denver? Power run, some throws to the middle. I don't know. Christian Watson got a bad matchup. Now, Watson's playing great. He's playing great. And maybe he wins again. But Jordan Love, this has to be a downgraded matchup. I think there's a lower scoring game. And I think Green Bay is starting to get in that late season mode. You know what we're going to do? We're going to run Josh Jacobs. And if we have to throw, we'll throw. And then we know Jordan Love could be good when we need that. But this is not a good matchup at Denver. And I'm not even going to touch the weather on this one till late in the week because weather changes so fast. And then you get some doom and gloom weather report, which I don't even know what it is now. And then you circle back Friday. Oh, never mind. So as right now, I'm just the weekend, we touch the weather and then we go with it. But right now, I do think there's a downside spot for him. Jaden Daniels, if he plays, I put him at quarterback 15. I don't know what the re-injury was to his elbow. I don't know if he could have played. I just at this point, he's had one big game in the games. He hasn't been healthy all year. It just seems like he's snake bitten right now. And if you're in the fantasy playoffs and you're thinking about using him, that's a tough role. That's a tough role. I don't think I could. And then Caleb Williams at quarterback 16. I will say this. You've heard me say this for weeks. When the Bears can run the ball, the Bears will run the ball. Now, it was interesting because Cleveland lost their interior lineman, Malik Collins. He was actually doing well as a pass rusher, but I think he was a big linchpin of their run defense as well. And last week, my goodness, Tennessee shredded them on the ground. And now they get the Bears, and the Bears with their diverse run scheme. You never know what run is coming. You never know run's coming. And so I think that the Bears are going to run. I think the Bears aren't going to have to score a lot of points. I think they're going to control the game. I don't think Caleb Williams throws much here. I definitely don't think they want to get him on Myles Garrett running after him all day. So I have Caleb low. Let's do one more here. Trevor Lawrence. Fantasy numbers, some weeks have been great, some off. He had a good game last week. He played really well. And they're playing the Jets this week. Jets are a sneaky good run defense. So this is one where Jacksonville may need to throw a little more than they want. But we saw Brian Thomas get unlocked a little bit last week. They were making, Lawrence made some nice perimeter throws. He doesn't always do that. So it was very, very nice to see that. And of course, Jacoby Myers, what a synergy they have. I always said Lawrence is good throwing in the middle of the field, and now he actually has a legitimate weapon there. So Lawrence has real upside here. But understand this. Jacksonville's been a Jekyll and Hyde team all year long. Big win against Indy. They're first place in the division. They're a high seed. This is just the week where Jacksonville will just magically disappear on you. Be careful of that. We don't know what can happen, and that's it. So, all right, let's move over to the running back position here. Again, running backs been largely healthy this year. It's been a great health season for running backs, unless you had one of those couple backs that were snake bitten. J.K. Dobbins is J.K. Dobbins. He's going to get himself hurt and all that good stuff. But I predicted this in the beginning of the season. I talked about how defenders are lighter than ever. There's two linebackers on the field instead of the 3 and 4 back in the day. I said, the offense can get a hat on most of the people who are going to attack the running backs. There are less kill shots. And I said, this is going to be sticky, I said, for a few years. And for the most part, that's it. I go, there'll be twisted knees and, be pulled hamstrings. Those things will happen. But we really haven't seen, running back just getting these death blows. And it's preserved a lot of injuries. So the running back position has been largely clean. So we go to the running back rankings. And I do what I will talk about Jonathan Taylor at number 6. Obviously, Taylor's been the superstar, but the last 5 or so games, he's been under 100 yards in 4. He's still a great fantasy start. But now with the quarterback, and not like Daniel Jones scared anybody, but if you're going on Riley Leonard as this recording, he has a knee sprain, we don't know if he's playing, or even Phillip Rivers, how do defenses not just load as much up front? Like Seattle could actually do two things at once. They send their simulated pressures. Well, what they could easily do is load everybody up, drop 1 or 2 out, but then send a lot of different pressure. So this is really a tough one. So Taylor has real downside here. Could he break a long play at any time? Of course you can. Can Taylor have a 3 touchdown game? Of course you can. You're not sitting him, but if you're in DFS or, if you're looking at building that big lineup, that this might not be the week you want Taylor, because I think that's going to be an issue. Josh Jacobs is 7. Again, I mentioned this earlier. A lot of people are worried about the Denver defense, and I continue to say Denver is a smaller defense, and Jacobs has been very good as an interior runner, and I think that holds well in this matchup. I think he will continue to do well. He hasn't had one really big fantasy games. The massive games are, but of course, Josh Jacobs is a strong play, and if you're betting him for a prop, I think there's a great chance he's going to see a lot of work here in a ball control game. Let's go to some questionables. I have Barkley at running back 12. I could put him a little higher. Last week was good. It was encouraging to see what he did on Monday night. And this is not a scary matchup. Just the way the overall week-to-week coaching of Philadelphia and the offensive line seems beat up. You always have guys limping off to the sideline, going to the locker room. It's been rough. So, I have him at 12. You're still starting him in a 12-team league. Hopefully for your fantasy league, he gets it rolling here. But he does have cupcake matchups against Buffalo and Washington in the last 2 weeks of the fantasy playoffs. But again, that hasn't always translated cupcake matchups into Barkley doing great. Ashton Genty at 15, just volume, I should put the downside tag, but at 15, you know what? I am giving the downside tag. I'm doing that right now. Just because not his fault that offensive line is so bad and there's no respect for the passing game. And if Genty doesn't get it done as a receiver, like the one game he had 6 catches, if he doesn't fall in the end zone, you could be looking at an 8-point game. Again, you're probably not. I think realistically, I'm at 15 with downside. You're starting him as a running back 2 for volume. But if you have a really good situation, kind of consider him as a flex play because that's the deal. Omarion Hampton at running back 17. I imagine his workload goes up a bit. He did look really good in his return despite the rough offensive line. Breece Hall at running back 18. I would be nervous to start him, and I have him in some spots. Last week was 43 yards. If we don't get Tyrod Taylor, so much attention goes on him. And again, the targets dry. He had the first game with Taylor, he had 4 targets, had like 70 receiving yards. And then the next game with Taylor, I think he had 1 target. And then obviously Taylor didn't play much. So, last week, Brady Cook, can't really count on much there. But if Hall doesn't have a stable quarterback situation, Jacksonville's a really good run defense. Again, can Hall break a long play? Yes. But if he doesn't, this could be one of those like 5-point fantasy games. So be careful there. RJ Harvey at running back 21 with downside. He got 2 touchdowns against Washington, but was very inefficient. He had a really good game in a easy matchup against the Raiders last week. But and even though it was like a 75-yard game, maybe 16 carries, top of my head, it was a good efficiency game for him. But I do think against Green Bay, this is not a good matchup for RJ Harvey. I think the Bears saw that last week, right? The Bears saw Green Bay is a good run defense. And I think, again, nobody's worried about Bo Nix, for the most part. So I do think RJ Harvey, I have him as a lower end RB2. And I was advocating him in the last 2 weeks. I advocated him hard last week, but this week I'm a little more bearish on him. I don't know that this is a player you want to necessarily trust in your fantasy post unless you have no better option. Because he has been catching passes. So definitely factor that in. He could catch 4 passes, and for PPR, that might get you through a bit. I do want to point out, I have Jaylen Warren at running back 23 against Miami and Gainwell at 28. I will say this, both got it done as receivers last week. That was nice because neither did well on the ground against Baltimore. And we're looking at a matchup. Miami started the season as a terrible run defense. If you're looking at full season like fantasy points against, Miami still looks like a cupcake matchup. It's not. They from week 6 on, they just fixed their issues. The coaching must have really stepped it up because I think they had players like getting out of spots, and I think they got better with their run fits. And so they just have been a much better defense. But Gainwell and Warren could both get done as passers. Gainwell just sees so many targets. Now, I keep Gainwell below Warren because Warren would have more scripts that would keep him active. Gainwell, I don't know if Pittsburgh's going to fall much behind in this game. I know Miami looked good against some bad defenses. Not that Pittsburgh's a great defense, but this doesn't necessarily look a great Tua spot here. So I have them both right at the edge of running back 2 range. You're starting them if you need to, and Gainwell is always risky because if he doesn't get those targets, but he has been pretty good for fantasy the last few weeks. So last like month. And of course, if you look back at that game he started, we throw that out because that doesn't factor into the Warren playing. But so Gainwell's more of that flex, but in a PPR league, he's definitely a preferred flex. I have Kyle Monangai down at running back 31. I need to move him up. I'm probably let's make that adjustment right here in real time. We got to move Monangai up. I don't know what I think I was maybe first before I was studying into the game. I was looking like maybe Cleveland would slow down the Bears. And then I thought through the Bears are going to be able to outclass them. The Malik Collins loss. So I think we're going to move Monangai all the way up to 23 because I think the Bears control this game. And if they control the game, we've seen the script already. First of all, they both will be heavily involved. So I have Swift at 19, Monangai at 23. So I think we look at it this way. When the Bears have a lead, Monangai's the closer. So Monangai actually has real upside here as well. So yeah, I rethink these sometimes. I'm off on Tuesday, so I do these rankings Monday night, and then I'm off Tuesday. And I come in this morning, and but I definitely, as the week goes on, I update these rankings throughout the week. I do post these on my X at Jim Coventry NFL. I have every week I have the top thread pinned, and if you go there, these rankings are always there. So I change them throughout the week, so you can always use those for your start sit decisions. I have Quinshon Judkins at running back 25 against the Bears. The Bears are not a good run defense, but as we know, even though Shador had the great game against Tennessee, I still think that the problem is that teams are just selling out on Judkins. His snap share is going down. It's not been great. He was in the 50-ish% range. So, and he does get goal line work as like the Wildcat back. But I guess if depending on your other options, Judkins can get volume. I just think the Bears are going to sell out to stop him. I think the Bears have a good chance of getting a lead. And I think we saw last week, Dylan Sampson was the hurry up back. It wasn't Judkins. Judkins is off the field a lot. So I think that there's a lot of worry for Judkins if you've been counting on him. But so I think he's in that borderline RB2 and flex range. Anybody else here? I have Kenneth Walker down at running back 27. Indy has been playing overly well against the run. They can get lateral, and that's where Walker needs to get. Their linebackers can get lateral side to side, and that anytime that the defense can do that, I worry about Walker because when you watch the film, you just see him. He's always hunting for the outside run. That's all he wants to do. And if the defense and then, of course, if he gets off to a slow start, Charbonnet could jump in. So, yeah, it's just rough there. Just finally with Chris Rodriguez at running back 36. Look, we've been saying he's very good. He's a good interior power runner. But here's the problem. Washington is usually trailing, and he gets game scripted out. And so he gets his 10 or 11 carries. He really isn't a receiver, so he's not that. So basically, he's what we said Krosky Merritt would be in the beginning of the season, 20 to 70 yards. Pray he falls in the end zone. So that's kind of rough there. All right, let's go next to our wide receivers. And we will, again, if I have questions, we'll take these at the end for sure. So, all right, so let's see. I did move Rashi Rice back to running back, wide receiver 3. Here's the first thing. Look, he's been great. Last week, he didn't play well. Houston played a lot of man. We've heard it over and over. Kansas City has not played great against man coverage. Well, the Chargers are your classic zone coverage team, and their corners are not of the caliber to man up Rice and win. So Rice is a great play. I haven't had a Puka, and I know Puka had the explosion week, but that's the thing. Puka doesn't always get the snaps. Puka, like when they go to the 3 tight end sets, Puka's like off the field sometimes, and we have the Adams games. There are occasionally the Adams games where he eats up the touchdowns, whereas Puka scored last week. So I think Rice is going to be just fed a lot of targets. The Chargers are good against the run, so I think that if the Chiefs still believe they're alive for a playoff spot, they probably do because they technically are. So I think they come out fine. So I have Rice ahead of them. But again, does it matter? Wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4, it doesn't matter. They're both superstars. They're both playing great. I do have Pickens at 5. A little worried after last week. Maybe it's just the media. Maybe it's just me watching the film and what they showed me and thinking, does it look like he's dogging it? I don't know. It was one of those things. And sometimes if it's a professional player and we say, oh, he could have gone back for that ball. Sometimes you can hurt yourself doing that. So, Pickens had a great year. He's been the wide receiver 2 in some formats up before last week, and check what this week's standing is. But you don't go away from him. But let's get away from the stars here. Jamison Williams, wide receiver 11 with downside. The Rams are good in terms of shifting their secondary pieces together. The individual corners aren't great, but they do have a very good team concept in their zone coverages. So that could be probably. And also, if the interior passers, the Rams gets going, I do worry about Jared Goff in this one on the road. Goff does struggle when he's pressured, and the Rams are equipped to get interior pressure. So I have downside tag on Williams, but he's been too hot not to start. The goose egg always sits there because he had one like 3 weeks ago, but he's hard to. And then I had a question about McConkey. The Eagles do have a really good defense. Justin Herbert's offensive line is terrible, and Philadelphia sent so much pressure. When I was watching, I'm going to top of my head, I would say Herbert was probably pressured on half of his dropbacks. It's got to be close. I don't think that's hyperbole. It was close. He was under massive, massive pressure, and didn't with the way they'll send players on that aren't expected, like they'll send a corner, they'll send a linebacker. Herbert probably had no idea where it's coming from, and so he never got on the same page with McConkey. McConkey should be fine. McConkey plays outside. He can move into the slot, but he does run a lot of in-breaking routes, and I think that's where you make your money against Kansas City. So I think McConkey should be fine here. Chris Jones had that great game last week, but those don't always happen. And if Chris Jones shows up and wrecks the game, yeah, McConkey has downside. But I think that he'll be just fine where he's at. Let's see here. Move down the list a little bit. Chris Olave at wide receiver 17. Last week, what we saw was here's the one problem with New Orleans receivers, including Juwan Johnson and now Devon Vele and Olave. If the Saints are close or leading, they'll run the ball. And I think it was 20 pass attempts, maybe. Not, it might have been 20. It was low. It was super low. Tyler Shuck did not throw many passes last week. It was whatever it was a very low amount. Might have been 20. And that's because they were leading the game. And so the reason you count on Olave, Juwan Johnson, and Vele is you're counting on them trailing. Because if the passes go into the 40s, it's a 3-man game. And they're all going to get 8 targets roughly. And so, they eat. And so Olave's at 17. Carolina, I honestly can't tell you week to week what we're getting from Carolina. Some weeks they look like a great team. Some weeks they look like a has-been. So it depends what version of Carolina comes out here. And it'll be interesting because the Saints are a really good run defense. The Carolina team is a phenomenal run blocking team. So there's a lot of versions of this game that can go, but having Olave at 17 is fairly, if his target share is fairly stable. I mean, last week wasn't a good game, but at least he had somewhat of a floor. So there's that. That Vele is more dicey in these. I do like Devon Vele, but he is way dicier because unless you think Carolina is going to have a lead and play throughout, then Vele may not be a factor. And Juwan Johnson, the same thing. So be careful with Juwan Johnson this week as well. I have a wide receiver or tight end 12, but there's going to be a downside ability on him if New Orleans plays with league, because these NFC South games are wacky, and you know that. You never know which one's going to win. I have Christian Watson at 22 with downside. I mentioned him briefly when I talked about the Jordan Love matchup. The outside corners are really good, but hey, we could see Watson on Riley Moss, and as good as Moss is, I think Watson's speed and athleticism could get him a big play or two. So I would rank him higher. I would rank him higher most weeks, but I am concerned about the Denver matchup. Very concerned about it, and I think Packers could run a lot here. In future weeks, Watson's going to be closer to wide receiver 15 based on the way he's been playing and the consistency that he's been showing. It's been wonderful to see how well he's played. Michael Wilson, I have it down at wide receiver 23. I don't know Harrison's status, who I put at 29, that heel injury he missed last week. We'll see how that goes. But again, it's until I get more practice report information, I'm keeping Wilson at 23. I don't know if I'll raise him, though, even if Harrison misses, because as I said earlier, he's going to get Lassiter or he's going to get Stingley. There's no easy matchup for him. And that pass rush, I'm worried for Jacoby Brissett in this one. Michael Wilson's been amazing, and I still have him in wide receiver 2 territory. But if Harrison is a full go at practice, I'm going to move Wilson down right with Harrison, wide receiver 29 or 30, because I don't know how that all shakes out. So we'll see that. For those who are looking ahead long term, Trey McBride, if you're going to make your fantasy championship and you have him, McBride gets the Bengals in week 17. I'd love to see a 200-yard game. Now watch it. He'll get 10 yards. And anyway, I digress. All right, let's see what else we got here. Wan'Dale Robinson back in the saddle after a bye week. I have at wide receiver 26. Playing Washington. He has real upside here. I'm going to put the upside tag on him actually as we speak, because if that game gets be a little more on the scoring end, yeah, Wan'Dale could go off here. The Washington corners are having their own set of struggles. I moved Justin Jefferson all the way down to wide receiver 27. It's so hard to rank him because we know the talent, and like through week 9 or 10, he was commonly getting 70 yards or so in a lot of the games. And then that one game he had with Max Brosmer, we were worried. And then he had a 2 for 11 last week. So, I mean, Addison was getting way more targets. I don't know what to do with him. The Dallas matchup's phenomenal, but the quarterback situation is useless. So Justin Jefferson at wide receiver 27. If you have established options, you pick if you have Michael Wilson or Justin Jefferson, you're considering using Wilson. Again, if Harrison plays, maybe not, but as of that point, kind of yes. I did rank the Indianapolis receivers way lower than usual. I moved Harrison down to 29. He had an injury issue, so we'll find out what his status is. No, he didn't. I was looking at Harrison's line. It was Alec Pierce. Alec Pierce left. It was apparently they were evaluating him for a concussion, but when Pierce was asked, he just dodged the question after the game. So I moved Pittman and Pierce to 30 and 31 against Seattle. It's a bad matchup. And now the quarterback, Riley Leonard, with if he makes it from the knee injury and he plays, there's a little bit of film on him, which is to his disadvantage. Any film out on him is a disadvantage, or it's Phillip Rivers. And I just do not see. Daniel Jones wasn't great, but Daniel Jones could get them the ball. I am very, very concerned about the state of this offense right now. Other than that, I did put an upside tag on DK Metcalf and Debo Samuel. We talk about the blueprint for stopping Metcalf, and it was like you bracket them and you don't worry about anybody else, and then you kind of get a pass rush on Aaron Rodgers. Baltimore, they didn't go that route, and there were a few go balls to Metcalf that worked, and when Metcalf is still an ace at that. So, but Miami's corners aren't good. If Miami doesn't like sell out to stop him, Metcalf could have a game here, but I have him at wide receiver 35 because in 4 of his last 5 games, he's just been single-digit fantasy points, and some of those were really low, so problematic there. Debo, the Zach Ertz injury. Debo hasn't been great, and I feel sad for Zach Ertz that he has such a terrible knee injury. John Bates is a blocker. He'll be in. Ben Sinnott, I don't know. They haven't given him many chances. So I would think that Debo Samuel is going to see an increase in work. Now, as to how much that means, don't know. But at wide receiver 36 was an upside. I think that's fair. Let's see. We got again wide receiver questions here. Let's see. This was a running back one. Let's see. Big situation, pick 3, full PPR. Tyrone Tracy, Devin Neal, Judkins, Hampton. Yeah, and I assume we don't have obviously, if this is recording, there's no injury report out on Tracy. He got hurt at the end of the last game. They played on that Monday night. The early expectation was he'd be okay, so it's very hard to call that for him. I have him at wide receiver 22. Running back 22 against Washington. It's a great matchup for him. Devin Neal, again, we don't know the status of Alvin Kamara at this time. Don't know if he's going to step back in the lineup. But overall, let me see where I have. I have him lower at 32. That's because of the Kamara thing. I'll move him up, but Neal would potentially have a good matchup. I'll probably move him up to the running back 24 range at that point. And then Hampton, again, I expect to see increased work from Hampton. I do have Hampton at running back 17. Kansas City's a decent enough matchup, but Hampton, we saw him catch a pass last week. He can get to the outside a little bit, so I think he's fine there. So I think if you're gonna, who's your fourth one in Judkins? Based on today, assuming Tracy's healthy, and now let's assume that Kamara's out. If he's out, then I would sit Judkins. If Kamara's playing, obviously we're sitting Neal. I think that's the way I would go with that. And yeah, so and I wouldn't worry about Tracy with Dart. I mean, they're a limited offense that teams take things away from. Tracy's looked good enough in flashes, but this matchup, Washington's can't. Their linebackers are only downhill guys, and Tracy has enough ability to get to the outside. They can't stop that. That's a real problem for them. All right, better for Ladd grabbing your weak defense. Kansas City against Tennessee, or this for Week 16, or New Orleans against the Jets. If Kansas City loses this week, I think all their heart goes away, but then that's possible they lose. So gambling a week ahead on them, if they lose, they're like out of the playoffs completely. They have like a small chance now. So based on today, I would probably go with New Orleans. That's probably what I would do. But if you think that Chiefs are going to be able to pull off a win this week, which they may, then I'd kind of go with them against Tennessee, because then they'd be in like a must win the rest of the way. And then another question from Jay about the defenses: Bears against the Browns, Browns against the Bears, or the Broncos against Green Bay. I won't want the Broncos against Green Bay. Green Bay is pretty careful with the ball for them. I know Jordan Love could go goofy and throw a few picks, but for the most part, I don't see that happening here. I'd go with the Bears. I'd be inclined to go with the Bears. What Shedeur did last week, good luck doing that again. If the Bears get a lead, I think the time of possession is really going to get dragged down by the Bears here, but I think that's going to force the Browns to chase. The Browns are on the road at Chicago. I'd probably go with the Bears. The Bears always are picking off passes too. All right, Lloyd, I got any other questions here? I got one more here. Let's see. Jaden Higgins, Quentin Johnson, and DJ Moore in a PPR. So Jaden Higgins, we avoided last week because of the matchup, but I think there's no reason not to go to him against Arizona. I do think that he's getting targets. I think that he's going to be fine with CJ Stroud. Quentin Johnson, the outside corners of Kansas City are their strength, so I don't see that as a good matchup for Johnson. And DJ Moore, 4 of his last 5 games, he's had less than 3 PPR points, and he had a 23 with those, of course. So I think at this point, Higgins has a floor, and I think you got to trust that floor. DJ's floor is so low that it could cost you a playoff game. Could DJ Moore put up a 20? Yeah, he could do it at any time. But again, I think the Bears are going to run, and I think they're going to have success. I don't think they're going to throw a lot here, and we have no inclination that Moore is even going to get targets. So Moore's the best player by a million miles, but it doesn't really matter a whole lot here. Do I have everybody's question here? Let's see. I got one more. Jonathan, looking at week 16, who would I? Um, so here's the problem with Waller. We have Greg Dulcich getting more snaps and just as many targets, if not more, last week. And I thought last week Waller would be ramped up. So this is like a 2-man game. So I know the matchup is insane. And if look, I would say this way. Here's what I'll tell you. I would pick up Waller now. And if Waller has an increase in snaps this week and he can push Dulcich into an ancillary role, you got a smash spot with Waller in week 16. Gesicki's going to be available on your waiver wire. I don't. His odds of having 2 big games in a row like last week and this week, that's not likely for him. So he'll probably remain on your waiver wire. So then in that case, I would, next week, if Waller doesn't get increased work, I'd dump Waller and pick up Gesicki for him. But if, Waller sees an increase in work, he'd be set there. All right, I think I got everybody's questions. Let's go to the tight end position now. All right, mark the time here. All right, perfect. So, tight end position. So Tyler Warren's playing Seattle. I have him at tight end 4. I have him with downside. He hasn't had a great run in a number of his recent games. It's a component of that Indianapolis offense kind of taking a dive, not being what they were earlier in the season. Seattle will give us some production of tight ends, but again, the quarterback position, that's what scares me. If we get an injured Riley Leonard playing, if we get Phillip Rivers playing, Mark Rippon, it's going to be a problem. I'm very concerned about the Colts offense here. It is one of those games where Seattle playing at home, if Seattle gets out on fire, it could be one of those games that gets ugly fast. And if Indianapolis has to go fast, pass first and be predictable, the bottom could fall out fast. So Warren's ranked high, but understand he has a lot of risk. Dalton Kincaid, tight end 8 with downside. He's only playing about 33% of the snaps, and that goes back before the injury. So he gets his 3 to 6 targets. But man, you're walking a tightrope because he's not on the field a lot. Last week he had a great matchup, and Knox was the one that was the lead. He was on the field a lot more, and he had the targets. Kincaid fortunately caught 4 passes on his targets, but it's real dicey with the snap share for Kincaid. But he is very good when he is on the field. Brenton Strange at 9. I do like the interior matchup here, and again, Trevor Lawrence is his best throwing to the middle. Last week it was a game that it was never going to work for Brenton Strange last week. The way the game shook out, he had to block more, I think, in that game. So they need him that way. Gadsden, I'm going to move lower. I did this before the Monday night game. I'm going to move him down because we had another, and it wasn't a great matchup against Philly, but now it's like 4 straight games where he hasn't done anything. So I think we have to move him. I'm going to move him down tight end 15. Yeah. So I think maybe for until next year, maybe I ship sail. Will he have a game before the end of the season? Maybe. Predict it. Good luck, right? Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely, 16 and 17. They're playing the Bengals. If you got them, use them. Even Likely had 95 yards in that Thanksgiving night game. Now, he had the fumble at the goal line. He should have had a touchdown as well. Last week, he should have had 2 touchdowns, but the one that they overturned it. That was, to me, it was ridiculous. It was a touchdown, but the rules are rules, I guess. Andrews still in that game had 4 for 40 in that Thanksgiving night game. So both of them are involved. I think they both are very involved here as well. I think this game should shoot out. So I would have no problem, even though I have them ranked lower. I would look, they're ranked lower because their offense has been bad. They haven't been consistent producers. But if I had Dalton Schultz and I wanted some upside, give me either of those Baltimore guys. I would go all the way up to Brenton Strange. If I had anybody from 9 through 15 and I needed upside, and I would go for the upside shot of taking either of those Baltimore guys over 9 through 15. 9 through 15 are 9 through 14 are steadier. I know I'm going to get a floor out of most of them. I know there's a floor there. I don't know with the Baltimore guys, that offense has just been so hard to predict. So I would look at that. Waller, as I mentioned, I moved him down to tight end 20. I was expecting last week to see the bump up. It wasn't there. And but it was good old Greg Dulcich coming in and getting all that work. But yeah, TJ Hawkinson, I think he scored a touchdown last week, but again, he's only getting 1 or 2 catches a game. It's rough. It's rough there. Kyle Pitts at tight end 10. He's had 2 good games in a row, 82 and 90 yards. If Drake London's out, Kirk Cousins has apparently figured out something with them. I mean, they got to throw to somebody. They got Mooney, they got David Sills. It's a mess there. And so Kyle Pitts, you could even make a case for putting him up to 8. I just am so nervous to trust him week in, week out. 2 good games, like when is the bottom going to fall? Because that's been his entire career. There, Kelsey at tight end 5. At least Dallas Goedert did well. We saw the tight end coverage for the Chargers was not great, and Kelsey should find some run. And Kelsey should, in theory, look to redeem himself after a rough performance against the Texans. One more question. Do I like the Tampa defense this week? I do like the Tampa defense this week. Thursday Night Football, you never know what you're going to get. But Kirk Cousins, we've already seen it. The pressure is a problem. He doesn't have weapons. If Drake London plays, I don't know that I'd like the Tampa defense. As of this point, I don't know if he's playing. I don't think he's playing. But if he's playing, that would change it. But I think if there's no Drake London, they have no receivers to respect. They can gang up on Bijan Robinson. They could force Cousins into some obvious passing situations. And that's exactly what you want. The Bucs may not be a great defense, but they're going to send that pressure, and Cousins may be just the guy to give them the little boost that they need. All right, everybody, thanks for hanging with me. Sunday morning, we do a start-sit show where you're watching right now, 2 hours before the main slate kicks off. I'll be on Sirius XM Fantasy Channel 87 on Saturday from 2 to 4 Eastern. These lineup rankings you have, they're pinned to my X at Jim Coventry NFL. If you have Wednesday waivers that run, my 10-minute only video of waiver plays is linked on that pinned tweet on Jim Coventry NFL and the X as well. Check that out. That one's always filmed at halftime in a Sunday night game. So if there was like a Monday night player that broke out, or even a second half Sunday night player, those players are not included in that video. So just understand, Coventry, why did you miss that? It's because when I filmed it, so that happens on an occasional week. A guy breaks out on Monday and don't have them. So there's that. All right, everybody, appreciate your time. Thank you for hanging with me. Best of luck in your fantasy playoffs. If you have a lineup question outside of the Sunday show, you can tweet the question to me at Jim Coventry. I answer questions Wednesday, Thursday, and then Saturday till early afternoon. Otherwise, I'm off on Fridays and Sundays. I'm only on the start system my whole day. I'm working from morning till bedtime for this wonderful job I've been blessed to have. All right, everybody, appreciate you. Have a wonderful day, and I will see you next time.